gotta be honest, for a 2025 car, I think that sounds pretty good. Well, hello one and all, welcome to Seen Through Glass. Welcome to the 2025 Aston Martin Vanquish Volante. I am so excited to be getting behind the wheel of this new Vanquish, firstly because this now represents the flagship in the Aston Martin range, and I think most of you know I've been a big fan of what Aston Martin have been doing the last few years. But secondly because everyone that's driven the new Vanquish has waxed lyrical about it, saying that it is the best Aston Martin in decades, and finally a car that can go up against its rival from Maranello, which is of course the Dodge Cylindri, a car that I absolutely adored. The thing is though, now that I actually have the keys to this car, I don't actually know what to do with it, because this new Vanquish makes 824 horsepower, like 1,000 odd newton meters of torque, and all that power is sent to the rear wheels. But it's November, it's like 10 degrees, the roads are super greasy, meaning it's going to be really hard to put that power down. And this Volante version weighs close to 2 tons and is as wide as a big Range Rover. When you write that all down, you realise this car really not made for this country. Like, there is close to nowhere in the UK where you could extract the performance of this thing, even if it was July and 30 degrees out here. This thing is destined for big European road trips, but I've only got the keys to it for a couple of days and I can only use it here in the UK. Which is why I'm kind of glad that Aston Martin lent me this Volante version, because it's less about ultimate performance and more about the lifestyle. The lifestyle you get with a £400,000 Aston Martin Super GT. And that's what I kind of want to discover. We get the super part, 824 horsepower, it's going to be super. Is it still a GT? If they've been chasing their rivals from Italy, has this become too performance focused? Or does it still have the luxury, the class, the elegance that I think a flagship Aston Martin should still retain? We're not going to be doing the big miles that I want to do in this thing as part of this video, but I am going to try and extract some of the performance and investigate, well, the other elements of what I think should make up one of these cars. So let's get out of town, because yeah, 824 horsepower at 20 miles an hour, yeah, pointless. Really, actually quite hard to do 20 miles an hour, I've got to be honest. The torque is available from 2,500 RPM, which means pulling away from traffic lights or roundabouts, you're already going too fast. It's impossible to pull away slow enough to not break the speed limit. So let's get out of here before I'm arrested. So yes, as predicted, the super part of this Super GT, frankly terrifying. I think I must have just applied maximum 30% throttle on that road just then. I did not need or want any more. This thing is a rocket ship. Funnily enough, obviously I just drove the new 911 Turbo S, also a rocket ship, but a car that I hadn't really considered as a rival for this thing because, well, it's half the price. But it is a rival because the Turbo S Cabriolet is a similar weight, puts out a similar amount of power and feels as ballistic on the public road. The cars just go about their speed in very different ways. The Porsche's rear-engined all-wheel drive, this is front mid-engine rear-wheel drive. The 911's got that T hybrid flat six engine. This has got the twin turbo V12. But to be honest, considering they both achieve a similar thing, it does make the Turbo S look like a bit of a bargain. But as much as I love a 911, they do not look like this. If you're looking for a reason to justify spending an extra 200 grand on a car that has similar kind of performance statistics, the looks of this Vanquish might be that reason, because I am obsessed with the front end of this car. Come back to the rest of it in a second, but oh my God, that huge grille, the design of the lights, the vents on the bonnet, it's elegant yet purposeful. Around town it gets so much attention, but good attention, if that makes any sense. However, as you make your way around the side, it's when I think things start to go a little bit wrong, because you start to realise just how insanely long this car is. And especially in Volante form, because the roof is gone, it just looks like a little bit of a, I don't know what, like a plank of wood. You sort of lose some of the curves and the lines. I just don't love it. And then we make our way to the rear, and for me things really start to go wrong. I'm just not a fan of the rear of this car, whether in Volante or coupe form. It gives me way too much sort of, I don't know what, Mustang energy, even like MX-5 energy, which I don't think is right for a car at this price point or with this badge. It's definitely a personal thing. Some people will love it, but this angle right here, I think, downplays the significance of this car. So for me, it's all about that front-on angle, or of course, the angle you get from behind the wheel. Now, funnily enough, when I first got behind the wheel of this vehicle, I was actually a little bit disappointed. I think maybe because my expectations were too high. Aston Martin have implemented this kind of great interior design language across their entire range now, but that means it's all quite familiar. When I got in this thing, I was like, oh, is this the same layout as the DB12? Oh no, this is the Vantage layout, or maybe it's the DBX layout. And I think I wanted something more, because this is the flagship model in the range. People had spoken so highly about it. I just kind of wanted to get the immediate fizz. I wanted to be like, wow, but I didn't. I just got in here and went, oh yeah, like Aston Martin interior. But with time, I've started to appreciate the little details. For example, these carbon fiber shifter panels, the amount of carbon fiber in here in general, the plushness of the carpet. Sounds like a weird thing to be talking about in an 800 odd horsepower supercar, but these are Bentley / Rolls-Royce level of plush floor mats. The amount of leather in here, the smell of the leather. There's a sort of shelf behind these rear seats, which is kind of pointless. You could probably put a jacket back there, but the shelves are housed beautifully. There's a carbon fiber strut across the top. It's all these little things that come together to make the experience in the interior quite exquisite. And with time, you start to go, ah yes, that's where my £400,000 went. Right, I've abandoned my usual go-to test route because it felt just a little bit too tight and narrow for this car, whilst I was surprised how much I could hustle this thing. And I do think you could really attack a sort of tight alpine or canyon road in this car. I mean, the brakes are really good at knocking off the speed considering the weight, but just the side, like, it's too much. It's too much. And it was the same with the Turbo S. You might remember from my video last week, I said the exact same thing. You need long flowing corners, great visibility, big straights where you can roll into the power rather than like because it's just, yeah, it's not best suited. Whilst it's capable, it's not best suited. I mentioned earlier I want to look at the GT element of this Super GT because my God, is it good. Right now I'm in GT mode. There are kind of 5 driving modes. You've got wet, GT, Sport, Sport Plus, and then an individual mode as well. Like this, which is the default mode, this thing is, it's quiet, it's supple, it's refined, roof up, roof down, you cruise. You can kind of just lean into the torque and it just moves you along without really much fanfare. It's not ostentatious, doesn't shift gears unnecessarily. It's just really calm. And because the torque, as I mentioned, is available from that 2,500 RPM, it's always in reach without having to go dun dun dun. It's the only thing with the Dodici Cilindri, whilst they've made it more GT car-like than previous front-engine V12 Ferraris, it still inherently wants to go, this is just like, carry on, sir. But the only problem with that is, if you're buying it with the expectations that I have for it, you want a bit more. You can give yourself a bit more by turning on the exhaust. That does tend to make a difference. not to the actual performance, but, well, if I shift down a few gears, at least to get a bit more noise. And in and around town, it makes more of a difference. Out here, it's not so much, but it does make more of a difference. What you can actually do is just knock yourself into sport, which is what I've ended up doing. I live in sport mode in this car, and yes, manual gears. I think that's kind of essential, because you then feel like you're in a sports car. It's less Bentley Continental GT/Wafter or DB12, and more like 800 horsepower and 400,000 pounds. It's just the experience that I want. Sport Plus may be unnecessary. I mean, it's not. If I was out in Spain or Portugal or one of our on-the-road driving tours, I'd be in Sport Plus the whole time. But Sport is just ideal because you can even dial back the suspension. There's 3 sort of firmnesses of the suspension. I'm in the softest one now, and like, I don't need to be crazy on the gears, but I can just play with them. Gets up and goes, and it's engaging. That's the key. It's got this 8-speed ZF gearbox, this car, and it's not the most engaging gearbox. Compared to the Dodge Cylindri and to the Turbo S, it's the weak point. If there is a weak point compared to those two, that's it. It's just a bit slushy and sloppy, not much character, doesn't really hit you. It's all just kind of, but it's effective. You just play with these lovely paddles to connect with the car. And that's the thing, in GT mode, you're just along for the ride, and that's great. If you're doing a long journey or commuting from the yacht to the estate, fantastic. But the minute you're out here, you want to be able to bang through gears and use that performance. It is mad, and I think it sounds good. What do you think, people? 2025 car, 2026 almost, and okay, fine, it's a twin turbo V12, but surprising amounts of grip as well. They've got a fantastic traction control system in this car. I haven't dialed it back at all. It just grips and goes. I do think if I dialed it back, I would be a bit more squirmy, which I'm here for, but today I'm just getting used to things, and it's so fantastically complete, this car. It really is so far offering so much for the money, which sounds mad. As I say, the Dodge is a little bit more supercar, the 911 Turbo S, a little bit more 911. This thing is just even more, except in terms of practicality. So I'm sorry to say, but this really winds me up. That is all the luggage space, or at least boot space, that you get in this £400,000 Super GT. Like I kind of mentioned, there is a space behind the rear seats, which sure, you could get creative and shove some bags in there, but what is with it these days with these manufacturers creating such tiny boot spaces? Because look at this car, it's huge. I mean, it's massive. I know the roof's got to go somewhere, but like, I'm barely getting 2 backpacks in here. Let me take this one out. That's my big old camera bag that comes everywhere with me. And then this one, sort of nothing really in it. There's the wind deflector, I think, an umbrella. I'm guessing that's a tire inflation kit, but it's not even that deep. And okay, fine, put the roof up. This sort of shelf there goes up as well, creates a bit more space. But then what's the point in having the Volante if you can't actually put the roof down? So I know Shmi 150 has proven that you can get creative. You can use these kind of cubby holes and things like that, and soft bags and whatever. But I just to say, it's another personal pet peeve I have, that manufacturers are really making boot spaces smaller and smaller, or getting rid of them entirely. For a car this big at this price point that's supposed to do this many things, I don't know how they couldn't have, or why they couldn't have tried to make this boot space a little bit bigger. It's not even a hybrid, this thing, you know, so they haven't even got that excuse. Shove all that stuff back in there. Is that going to go down? I mean, it's just like, yeah. So in terms of practicality, is this something you're going to have to be aware of if you're not a Tetris player? But maybe it can be forgiven because of, well, yes. So I don't love how it looks from the back, but it does look quite good here. Yeah. But the performance, the capabilities, versatility is really making this thing fairly sensational. Let's see from the side. Yeah, look, it's just a long sort of arrow, isn't it? It looks almost like a Barchetta concept. a predictably British November day, the weather has suddenly turned miserable, like really, really miserable. So the roof is back up, and actually we're quite nicely cocooned in here with the roof up. You get loads of that engine and exhaust character, but road noise and things like that, pretty good. And what I actually enjoy is you can still get so much fun out of this car despite the awful conditions and the amount of power it gets. Sometimes when conditions turn like this and you're on something with 800 odd, oh my gosh. Now that is where this car is terrifying. It is so wide, little moments like that come out of nowhere, make you poo your pants. That's the negative. What I was going to say is when you have a clear stretch, look, you can still do this. You can extract some performance, you get the sound, it's engaging to drive. I think this thing is a winner. I have to say, I think it is a huge winner. Does it deserve the flagship Aston Martin titles? 100%. This for me is the best car that Aston Martin make right now. Is it the best Aston Martin ever, or of the last 20 years? I don't know. I probably haven't spent quite enough time with it, haven't used it in enough of the cases that I'd want to give it that title, but I think this is amazing. I can only imagine that the coupe is just that much better. It would be lighter, a little bit stiffer, all the kind of things that you would maybe want from a car like this. But, I mean, look at me out here. This is horrendous, and I'm still having an absolute blast, and I feel resplendent. It is so much more of, oh my God, again. Okay, take it easy, Sam. It's much more of an overall package than the Turbo S. It offers so much more. I maybe prefer the dynamics of the Dodici Cylindri. That's just because I am a Ferrari guy. But if you're someone who wants to be able to do long distance GT life and live with this thing almost as a daily, this car is going to be better rounded. So I can see why people give it such applause, because maybe it does something that the Ferrari doesn't, which is the really mundane, ploddy stuff, which you don't often want from a Ferrari anyway, but yes. Oh, I'm so glad I have finally experienced this thing, and I understand what everyone was talking about. It is absolutely brilliant. I now think that next year, let me get my hands on a coupe and do a European adventure with it. Take it somewhere with hot, dry roads, wide dry roads, and see dynamically just how much further it can go. But yeah, I have whoa! There we go. Yes, car, come on, kill me. I want you to kill me. That's the stuff which maybe I want a little bit more of with this thing every now and again. It is there, but it just looks after you so much, it coddles you so much that it puts you in a sort of false sense of security that you're in something that's a bit more sedate. So maybe you just need to kind of hustle it, push it into these situations to make your heartbeat rise. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed the video. A bit of a weird one with all the weather and things going on, but I've had an absolute blast. So give it a thumbs up if you have enjoyed it. Stay subscribed. Plenty more videos to come.